discipline. Throughout this presentation, we welcome your comments and questions. To send us a question, just click on the link on your screen and type in your question. I will receive it and ask it aloud to our parenting expert, Dr. Michael Popkin. If you have trouble hearing us at any time during this presentation, please hang up and call back in. Dr. Popkin, do we have you on the line? We're still waiting for Dr. Popkin, so if
Monique?
you just hold. Dr. Popkin, welcome.
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I had a little trouble connecting.
That's okay. We have a large number of participants today, so we might have a few that are still trying to get in and the lines might be tied up. So thank you for joining us.
Sure.
And if you're ready, we'll go ahead and get started with our presentation.
Great, ready to go.
Okay. Dr.
Did you
Michael
want me to start,
Popkin,
or were you going to start?
I'm going to go ahead and introduce you. Dr. Popkin
Okay.
is the president of Active Parenting Publishers. He's the author of parenting guides, several parenting guides, including Active Parenting of Teens, Taming the Spirited Child, and Getting Through to Your Kids. And he's also the spokesperson for Real Parents, Real Answers. Dr. Popkin, could you give us an overview of Real Parents, Real Answers?
Sure. Thanks, Monique. Real Parents, Real Answers is really a campaign as well as a website that focuses on helping parents help their kids make the choice not to smoke or use other tobacco products. We've been doing this for a number of years, and I will talk a little bit today about smoking and what we can do to prevent that in our youth. But we're going to do that within a larger context of discipline and how you can really use discipline to teach kids everything from good behavior to your family values. Let's talk a little bit about smoking prevention and Real Parents, Real Answers first, though. We do have on the website, by the way, and if you're not familiar with the Real Parents, Real Answers website, please check it out after this. Their message boards, I've got a blog on there, and one of the things that I really like about this particular effort is that it also involves parents sharing with other parents what has worked for them in an effort to prevent smoking in their kids. And I even ask parents from time to time to think about what helped you make the choice not to smoke if you made that choice, and what got you into smoking if you made that decision, and what you've done to try to change that. So there's a lot of good sharing on there, as well as solid information in terms of the research and what we can do from a parenting perspective. Today, though, let's talk about the prevalence of underage smoking a little bit. We'll talk about discipline, what it is, and how it works. Does it work? And when it doesn't work, why not? And what can we do to make it work more effectively? I'll give you some guidelines for discipline, so you'll have some actual tools to practice after the webinar. We'll talk about setting limits on behavior, which is really what discipline is all about, and family involvement, some things you can do to get your family more involved together and make discipline easier and more effective. The big picture on youth smoking, and again, we won't spend a lot of time on this today, but there's some good news in terms of teen smoking. We find that it has been declining. There are a lot of groups, not just ours, but an awful lot of groups that are making a concentrated effort to help teens make the decision not to smoke. And we're seeing teen smoking declining. 8th graders, it's down by 66% compared to its peak. Smoking is also down 54% among 10th graders and 41% among 12th graders. So that's great news, and that really translates really to a lot of health problems avoided and a lot of deaths avoided. So we can be excited about that. The bad news, though, is that still over a fifth of young people are still smoking when they leave high school. It's 20%. That's still a lot of kids. We know that lifetime smoking habits almost always begin before the age of 18. So it's really important as a society and as parents and families and communities that we really get the message to kids not to even try smoking. Don't even pick up the habit. And we know if we can get them to make that decision, when they're adults, they'll probably never smoke. The peak years for trying a first cigarette has dropped. It's down to 6th or 7th grade. So in that middle school period, if you've got a child in that area, that's a time when they are going to be offered cigarettes, and there's a good chance that A good number of them will experiment. Experimenting used to be the kind of thing that we could kind of turn our heads about and say, well, they might try it, but they'll cough a few times and then never want to smoke again. And certainly many kids have that experience. Unfortunately, we find that a lot of kids that do try smoking like it to begin with. It seems to be something to do with their, maybe genetic constitution or something. But some kids, the ones that become heavy smokers, often like tobacco the first few times they try it. They get a little high, a little buzz from it. So we want to get the message out to kids, don't even try it. Don't even take a chance. Just like you don't want your kids to even try heroin because we know how addictive that or crack cocaine can be. We don't want kids to try tobacco either. So,
Dr. Popkin, we're getting a few messages in that are asking us to speak up. So if we
speak up. Oh, okay.
We will try to speak up a little bit louder so that everybody can hear us.
Okay. All right, the big question, how do we help our children make the choice not to smoke? And in this webinar series, and this is the second of 4, we'll be focusing on a number of ways, including effective communication, encouragement skills, and today's topic, discipline. Discipline does play a key role in preventing smoking, just like it plays a key role in a lot of other things that we want to get through to our kids about. So what works and what doesn't work about discipline? First of all, I want to remind people, if you're not aware, that discipline, the word itself, doesn't mean to punish. Discipline actually comes from the Latin word disciplina, which means to teach. Discipline is about teaching our kids everything from values, right and wrong, teaching them character traits like courage and responsibility and cooperation, respect, and more. And it's about teaching the limits of situations, how to play within the rules. In other words, what's okay and what's not okay, starting in the family and then in the classroom and eventually in the community. So we're trying to teach kids. Punishment is one way to teach, but it's a way of teaching that really involves hurting the child. The idea about punishment is you do something outside the limits of what we want for you or what's accepted by our family or our society. We're going to hurt you for it. And by being hurt for it, you'll learn not to do it again. Interestingly enough, that teaching by hurting strategy was used in the classroom also. You remember the old, you miss a math problem and the teacher raps the student on the knuckles. That was before our time, but that seemed to be a way of teaching math. And we eventually realized you didn't have to hurt kids to teach them math, and you really don't have to hurt kids to teach them character or right from wrong or the rules of the situation. So the problem with punishment in a democratic society where people are more and more treating each other respectfully and as equals, the notion that you hurt me and I have a right to hurt you back has filtered down as far down as to kids, and that hurting you back is something that really backfires with parents. Now, we use punishment because it does work in the short run. Very often, you hurt your child, whether it's with a spank or taking away a privilege or something, and they'll stop the misbehavior. And it's what we learn to do. Most of us grew up in a time when punishment was a key form of parenting and really goes back maybe 1,000 years or more. The backfiring I started to talk about a minute ago is that it leads to resentment and retaliation more and more. Again, as people expect to be treated respectfully in our society, if you hurt me, I have a right to hurt you back. At least that's the way a lot of people think of it, and kids are no different. They get even with parents in a lot of ways, from calling them names to misbehaving more. We also know that punishment tends to lead to sneaking, blaming, and making excuses. It doesn't really lead to what we call an internal locus of control, the idea that I'm in charge of my behavior, that I want to make good decisions. It leads to, I got to avoid the person punishing me, so I'm going to sneak more or find a way to blame or make excuses about it. And finally, a problem with punishment is it tends to undermine the relationship. When you hurt your child, particularly if you hurt them emotionally or physically, it's harder for you to establish a kind of bond with them that enable you to be a real influence in their lives. So, well, we do find a need for discipline, but we want to provide discipline that's, first of all, respectful of kids, like the police officer that pulls you over for driving too fast when he gives you that ticket. He's trained to be respectful, or she's trained to be respectful. She's not supposed to yell at you or give you a berating, or certainly not supposed to hit you. But she is supposed to give you the consequence of your misbehavior, which in that case is a ticket. We also
Dr.
want... Yes.
I'm sorry, Dr. Popkin, we have a couple of questions. A couple of people have asked, just to do some housekeeping, if this PowerPoint is going to be available after the webinar, and the answer is yes to that, and we'll explain that more at the end of this webinar.
Okay.
But I also have a question, and it reads, Dr. Popkin, I understand that physical punishment won't work for older kids and mature issues like smoking, but can punishment be effective at very, very young ages?
It can seem effective because, again, it'll work in the short run. You give a child a spank on the rear end, and he may stop or she may stop doing what she was doing. But in the long run, there are better methods of discipline that don't run the risk of the resentment and retaliation, that don't lead to the sneaking and the blaming and the excuse-making. And it actually teaches responsibility. And that's the bottom line in this. We want to use discipline to teach kids to accept responsibility for their behavior. And physical punishment just is high risk. It's not that it's immoral. I mean, it's not child abuse to give a child a spank on the rear end, but it just runs a risk that you don't need to take, and that there are better ways to get the message across. Certainly as the child gets older, it's less and less effective and gets to the point of being ridiculous or even inviting a real fight, if you've got a teenager and you're using physical punishment. Let's look at the next slide, Dominique, the discipline slide. On when you do discipline, we find that it's much more effective to be respectful. I was talking about that, about the police officer that's trained to be respectful when he or she enforces discipline. We also want to allow for youth participation in the discipline, rather than just have this be something that's handed down from on high by the great dictator in the family. And we want kids to be involved in deciding on what the consequences are and how discipline will be enforced. Now, we're still the leader in the family, and we still have to make the final decision. I'm not suggesting we turn that over to the kids, but when you empower them to be part of the problem-solving process, you give a lot more buy-in and a lot more cooperation when it's time to discipline. We also want discipline that fits the situation, that instead of the punishment scenario, which is one size fits all, if you misbehave, you go sit in the corner, or if you get a spanking or what have you, it's much more effective to have the discipline fit the misbehavior. And the child learns that my misbehavior logically leads to this kind of result, and it's not such a pleasant result. So maybe I want to think about how to do it differently next time. And I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. We talk about some of the discipline techniques we can use. And finally, it's important to be firm when you discipline, but not harsh and not angry. And that's a trick for a lot of parents, to learn to be able to discipline calmly. So often we wait till we're so upset and so angry that we discipline in a way that really makes the situation worse. If you can discipline when you're still calm and yet still be firm with it, then you become neither a dictator nor a doormat. And that kind of leads us to the next slide. We're going to talk about
Actually, Dr. Popkin, we have another question.
Okay.
This one reads, you mentioned discipline should allow for youth participation. I've heard some parents let their child pick what their consequence is for breaking rules. Is this effective?
It can be if the child or the teenager has been taught how to do that. If you just do that off the bat, then the child's either going to pick a punishment, do 25 push-ups, or, do this or that they've learned from maybe more authoritarian discipline in the past, or they're going to pick something that's, just nonsense and doesn't bother them in the least. So you've got to teach them how to participate, and you can do that, through discussion, through dialogue about, what the misbehavior was and why it's important that they not do that, or that they start doing something they're not doing. And help them, be involved in thinking about it. But don't just turn it over to them to let them make the decision, or you'll wind up with some strange choices. Okay, setting limits on behavior. We're going to talk a little bit about freedom within limits. We teach a lot of these skills in our active parenting courses. These are like 12-hour courses that are offered, throughout the world, really. And I guess if we were to boil down the whole idea of the model of active parenting, it would be this concept of freedom within limits. That we're trying to parent children to go out and succeed in a democratic society. A democratic society is a society that's based on the notion of freedom, but freedom within limits or laws of society, and everybody participates in setting those laws through voting for the leaders, and there's a lot, again, buy-in on that. So freedom within limits is a great model for raising kids that are going to go out and succeed in a kind of society that's based on freedom within limits. In the family, the limits are set by the parents. That's the leader in the family, that's the lawmakers in the family, and they have to be the ones to enforce it. But if you are too tight with those limits, if you dictate to your kids, then that invites rebellion eventually, and they get old enough to not want to take it anymore. If, on the other hand, you back off so far that there's a lot of freedom but no real limit setting, no boundaries around what's okay and what's not okay, kids that grow up in that kind of situation become spoiled and often become lawbreakers when they get older themselves because they're not used to having any limits. So we want to avoid the extremes of too much freedom or too much limits. And the graphic really is a squiggly line within a circle, freedom within limits. Children want independence. They want freedom. They want to be able to decide for themselves what they want, what they can have, and make those choices. That's the notion of freedom. And with young kids, you've got to limit that freedom pretty tightly, or you'll have your toddler, getting in all kinds of trouble and getting hurt. So we provide those limits very tightly when they're young. But as they get older, we're gradually backing off so that circle is getting wider, and we're allowing them more choice, more freedom as they get older. And as they act more responsibly, we back off even farther and let them have more say in what they're doing and more decisions to make. So that, like in our case, we've got an 18-year-old living at home, and my wife, who's probably a much better active parent than I am, has done a great job backing off and teaching him to behave responsibly, and he's now making most all of his own decisions. And that's the way it should be when it works well. And he's going to leave home next year and hopefully go to college, and he'll be having the same kind of freedom that other adults in our society have. So again, it's a gradual backing off as long as kids are acting responsibly. When they're not acting responsibly, then we have to become tighter with the limits and allow less freedom. Teaching these kids a relationship between freedom and limits is a key part of our job as parents if we're going to teach them to be responsible and successful. I remember doing a talk show interview in San Francisco a number of years ago, and a mother called in and said, I was having this problem with my son, and he wasn't doing well in his homework, and he was spending too much time watching TV, so I finally told him no more TV. And he said to me, well, if I get my grades back up, can I watch TV again? And I said, yeah, you can watch TV again if you get your grades back up. And, well, the next semester he got his grades back up. He was making all A's and B's again. So now he wants to watch more TV. What do I do? And I said, well, you congratulate him. Not just because he got his grades back up, although that's certainly useful. You congratulate him because he understood the relationship between responsibility and freedom. He accepted the responsibility of taking care of his grades and getting them back up, and he did that because he realized that would earn him more freedom. And so your part is to follow through with your agreement and allow him more freedom. Now, I would say that when it comes to television and other forms of screen time, whether it's computers or video games or whatnot, you do want to have some limits on how much kids can do because those things are highly engaging to the point of being addictive sometimes. So, again, in our family, because our kids were also playing sports and the music, we had a rule that there was no television on school nights, and we limited it somewhat on weekends. If your kids have the time to watch a little TV on school nights, just limit, or again, computer games or video and stuff like that, or internet, access, limit it to a certain amount of time so it doesn't get out of hand. Maybe it's an hour on a weeknight and more on the weekend. Okay, so let's talk about how we provide those limits. When kids challenge those limits, and we need to teach them to get back inside those limits and follow through with their responsibilities, what are some of the discipline methods that work better than punishment? One of them, and this is so simple that it'll sound silly, but starting with a polite request. Remember I talked about how important it is to be respectful of kids, that we expect kids to speak to us respectfully. We want to be spoken to respectfully by our bosses if we work for somebody, or by the police officer or what have you. The whole idea of asking for what you want politely is a great first step. So if your child has a problem with leaving a mess in the den while they're watching TV or after they're finished, a simple, please clean up this mess, or when you finish with television, please put your dishes back in the dishwasher and clean up your crumbs. Very often that'll be enough to get a result, but very often it won't. And so we go to a firmer form of discipline or communication, which is called an I message. This is I as in me, myself, as opposed to you. So instead of starting off with, you left your mess all over the living room again, we start with an I, which is less confrontational. I have a problem with the mess in the family room. Okay? So I accept responsibility for this. This is my problem. I got a problem with your behavior. Not that you're a bad kid, not you're lazy or sloppy or this or that. It's I've got a problem, or when you leave a mess in the family room. Some people like to start an I message with the phrase, when you. But I like just owning the problem. I have a problem with the mess in the family room. And then we let them know how we feel. We want kids to know how their behavior affects others' feelings. This starts teaching empathy, which is a very important relationship building skill. So I felt taken advantage of. And we give a reason, because, again, the days of the parent as a dictator are long gone. Just to give orders and not any reasons will eventually lead to rebellion or backtalk or other kind of problems. So I'll give them a reason, because I have to clean up the mess you made. Okay, so I have a problem with the mess in the family room. I feel taken advantage of because I have to clean up the mess you made. Now, you'd think they'd get it from that, but we can make the I message stronger by letting them know what you would like. I would like you to take your dishes to the kitchen. And you can make it even stronger by getting a commitment. Will you do that? And then ask them when. Because if you don't ask when, if you don't get a time commitment for some of these things, it could be next decade before they get around to taking the dishes to the kitchen. So an I message is a very powerful way of communicating what you want, how you feel, why, and what you'd like, without being confrontational. It's confrontational. I shouldn't say that. You are confronting, but you're doing it in a way that doesn't attack the child or the teen. So it's less likely to create a power struggle or get the kind of conflict that when you just, get angry and start, you've left such a big mess in here, and, clean it up now. I don't have to tell you anymore. Those kind of things tend to really backfire. Sometimes kids won't remember. An I message might get through, but they forget. Changing habits. Someone said it takes about 30 days to change a habit. So if your habit is to leave your stuff in the den or not turn off the lights in your bathroom when you leave in the morning, or whatever the habit is, it's not that you're necessarily being a bad child or teenager when you don't do it. It's just you haven't learned the new habit yet. So sometimes a firm reminder can help you remember. You come back in and you see the mess is still there, 30 minutes later. It just might be, Ben, clean up now. Just, again, a firm, clear reminder. Again, not an attack, not so angry that you're inviting a power struggle, but just a firm, I'm serious, clean it up now. Okay, so those are three essentially communication skills that work as discipline methods. Yeah, Monique, you got another one?
A question came in. It says, I have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. Will these methods work for very young children? What age is appropriate to begin using these methods?
Well, it's interesting. The first time I was on the Oprah Winfrey Show, she asked me the same question. And the answer was, when our daughter Megan turned 1, she stood up in a rocking chair one day, and I said, Megan, rocking chairs are for sitting in, please sit down. And she just stood there, and she looked at me with that look in her eyes that says, what are you going to do if I don't? If you're a parent, you've seen that look. And about 1-year-old, they can comprehend what's going on even though they can't speak about it. So I said, Megan, either sit in the rocking chair, I'm going to have to take it out of the room, and you can try again tomorrow. And she stood there, and she looked at me, and so I very calmly and firmly picked her up, put her aside, and took the rocking chair out of the room, put it on the other side of the gate. She just watched. The next day, when she stood up in the rocking chair, and I said, Megan, please either sit in the rocking chair, I'm going to have to take it out of the room, she sat down. She was a real cooperative child. She got it with one trial, but she understood. She understood the lesson that if you don't do what you're asked to do, sometimes, in this case, you lose the rocking chair. There is a consequence. And that gets us really into the advanced discipline methods, if you go to the next slide, Monique, we've got the notion of consequences. We try communication skills. There's no real consequence except you can have a straightforward confrontation from your parent. A gentle confrontation, a loving confrontation, and that will often get results. But sometimes kids still forget or just doesn't, matter to them as much as it needs to. There are two types of consequences we talk about. One is a natural consequence, and the other is a logical consequence, and I'll explain the difference in a minute. And then we also have a method called the FLAK method. This is an acronym that stands for feelings, limits, alternatives, and consequences, and we'll talk about that in a little bit also. So let's go to consequences on the next slide. A little formula I came up with for teaching responsibility. Responsibility equals choice plus consequences. Kids that behave responsibly, that own responsibility for what happens to them in their life, eventually learn to make better choices, and so they are more likely to be successful. That's the big picture of parenting. It's not discipline for just getting the plates picked up in the den so we have a neat house. That's important, but the real big picture is we want our kids to grow up with the kind of character traits that will enable them to succeed. And one of those traits is responsibility. So to teach them responsibility, we want to give them choices, because if you only give them commands and demands, then you're responsible for the outcome, not them. They don't feel like, I had no choice in the matter, so I'm not really responsible here. And we also want to give them consequences for those choices. So your choices lead to consequences. First type of consequences are what's called natural consequences. Those are results that naturally occur from an action without the parent or teacher doing anything. In other words, Mother Nature provides the consequence. We've all learned a lot of life lessons from Mother Nature, whether it's learning that forgetting your gloves, leads to the natural consequence of getting cold hands, or not wearing a jacket leads to the natural consequence of just getting cold, period. Or leaving a bike outside could lead to the natural consequence of rusting, or lots of other examples like that. There are some situations where you can't use natural consequences to teach. As great a teacher as they are, there's just some situations that are either too dangerous. For example, the natural consequence of playing in the street might be that you get hit by a car. That's obviously not something that we can let kids experience. Sometimes the consequences are too far in the future. Not working hard in school has a natural consequence of limiting your job opportunities years later, but that's so far in the future that kids don't really connect it. If it doesn't happen soon, kids aren't real good at projecting that far in the future, so the natural consequence is not going to be a good teacher in that situation. And third, the natural consequences don't always affect the child. For example, I remember being on CNN not long ago, and they shared that story about the couple on a AirTran flight whose child had a tantrum about the time the flight was supposed to take off. Maybe you saw it on the news. And they couldn't get the child calmed down and in the seat, so they asked the parents and the child to get off the plane, and they had to wait to another flight. And they want to know whose fault was that, the parents, the child, or the airlines, and all this. Well, it was a case of where the natural consequences of the flight being delayed didn't affect the child. What was it, a 1.5-year-old, 2-year-old child, wasn't concerned about the flight taking off. So that wasn't going to be something that could teach the child. And by the way, it was a time for the parent to take some action instead of talking. They were trying to calm the child down first. What they should have done was pick the child up, put her in her seat, fasten the seatbelt, and let her continue to cry, and then calm her down so that the flight could have taken off and the other 200 or 300 passengers could have gotten to where they were going on time. So anyway, those are the kind of situations where you can't let the natural consequences teach. Now, you can't use natural consequences to keep kids from smoking because of the first two. The situation's too dangerous. The natural consequences of smoking going to be health problems and even death. So that's not something we can let kids learn from. And two, the consequences are too far in the future. If the natural consequences of smoking, happened, 2 minutes after, you took your first puff, then I think nobody would smoke. But the fact is that, the consequences are sometimes iffy and they're too far down the road, and kids particularly, but even often adults don't really really get it. It's too easy to deny that those consequences exist or that it'll really happen to me. So in any of those situations, when you can't let the natural consequences teach, we use a type of discipline called a logical consequence. Logical consequences are those consequences, and I think you need the next slide there, Monique, are those consequences that are logically connected to a misbehavior and applied by an authority, such as a parent or a teacher, to influence the child or someone else to behave within the limits of the situation. So we're trying to teach kids that you got to stay within the limits, and the natural consequences can't be used in this case. So we're going to come up with a consequence that's logically connected to the misbehavior. There's a cartoon we use in the Active Parenting Now program. It was originally written by Hank Ketchum, was a Dennis the Menace cartoon, but we got permission to use it as part of the video program. And it shows Mother coming into the kitchen, and Dennis is crayoning on the walls. And Mother says, "Dennis, how many times have I told you not to crayon on the walls? Go sit in the corner." Well, go sit in the corner is her typical punishment. You know, you've done something wrong. I'm going to punish you. Go sit in the corner. And Dennis says, "Oh, Mom, that's kid stuff." And the mother thinks for a second and says, "Well, maybe you're right. How about a spanking?" Then he says, "Oh, Mom, I'm way too big for a spanking." She says, "Well, how about no dessert for a week?" "No, Mom, that never works." And then she thinks and says, "I got just the thing." And she comes back. She's got a bucket of water and a sponge. And she says, "Wash it all off and don't slop the water around." And the next scene shows Dennis washing the walls. And he's saying, "Boy, this stuff sure goes on a lot easier than it comes off." And he's having a heck of a time with it. And Mother comes back, and the crayoning is still half on the walls, and there's no Dennis to be seen. She says, "Dennis?" And he's over there sitting in his rocking chair in the corner saying, "Over here in the corner, Mom, being sorry I done it." And the joke, of course, is that sometimes kids would rather have the punishment because sitting in the corner thinking about it's a lot easier than using your elbow grease to wash the walls. But what Mother had really stumbled on was a consequence that was logically connected to the misbehavior of crayoning on the walls. Whereas her typical punishments, like sitting in the corner, a spanking, no dessert for a week, no television, those kind of consequences are just punishments, and they're not related, so the kid doesn't feel responsible for the outcome. And again, we're trying to teach responsibility, so when we're not around, to punish, to catch them and to punish them, when they're off at college, that they've got enough internal character and integrity to do the right thing because they've learned responsibility and cooperation and respect for others and some of those values. So we use discipline as that teaching tool, not as a way just to suppress bad behavior, but as a way to really teach the kind of character that will carry them a long way in life. So the way we structure logical consequences, and we always give a choice because, again, to teach responsibility, we want choice plus consequences. The two types of choices we use are an either or choice. Either clean up the mess in the den when you're finished watching TV, or there'll be no snacking in the den at all. That's an example of a logical consequence. Now the logical consequence part could be anything you can think of, as long as it's logically connected to misbehavior and isn't abusive or punishing, and fits some other guidelines that we'll go into in a minute. It can be effective. So it's not just one consequence fits any misbehavior. It's what you can think of. And again, that's where a parenting group can be real helpful because you can brainstorm with others and kind of get a hang of thinking about these things logically. Okay, so an either-or choice is one way to do it. The other kind of logical consequence is given as a when-then choice. The either-or choice, by the way, is real effective for stopping a behavior you want to keep inside the limits, like leaving a mess, not turning off the lights, hitting your little sister. Either play without hitting, or go to your room for a while and play by yourself. The when-then choice is a good way to motivate a child to do something they really don't want to do. And we do this by taking two things that they ordinarily do. Let's say taking a bath is something they're not crazy about, but they do like for you to read them a bedtime story. And you just sequence it so that the part they don't like so much, the bath, comes first. So when you're taking your bath, then I'll read you a story. If we don't have time because we've taken so long getting the bath done, then we'll have to skip the story. So again, the consequence of not taking a bath and not taking it sooner rather than later is that you missed the story. And again, you only use consequences that you can live with, that you can feel good about. In fact, that kind of leads us into some guidelines for setting up logical consequences. Let's look at
Dr. Popkin.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention that we have a lot of questions coming in, and it's going to be hard to get to them all right away during our presentation. So we're going to try to get to a lot of them at the end. But I did have a couple that came in specifically on logical consequences.
Okay.
So the first one says, I have a 9-year-old child who curses, but only at school. I'm struggling to find a logical consequence, especially since he doesn't have that behavior at home.
In school kind of problems, you need to meet with the teacher. Again, it needs to be a group effort. So you and the teacher need to sit down and talk about, the situation where the child curses and what kind of consequences she uses there. Usually for cursing, separating the child from, the group is usually a good consequence, that you can't be around others without, using bad language or hitting or any kind of antisocial behavior. And you need to be separated for a while, and whether that's in a special part of the room, maybe a chair in the back of the room where you read for a little while, or maybe you go sit in the principal's office if the school's set up that way. But the parent has to be involved with the teacher in that case, and then also to have some follow-up consequence at home. Maybe when that happens at school, then the child has to spend some of their free time at home instead of watching TV or playing video games. They've got to, sit and write a letter of apology to the teacher and explain why, using that kind of language at school is disrespectful, and how you want to be treated respectfully, then you have to treat others respectfully. And by the way, that concept of mutual respect is, got to be careful not to use that kind of language with our kids either. If we talk to them disrespectfully or using that kind of language, then it's really easy for them to pick it up and feel like it's okay for them to talk to others that way. Okay, let's go through the guidelines, and I'll try to do this fast, Monique, so we'll have 10 minutes. I know we want to try to end this at 2, so I'll try to get through the next couple slides pretty fast, and we'll be able to talk about more of those examples. Try to keep this in mind when you set up logical consequences, that you want the child to help decide the consequence. Again, the whole idea of participation, that you're part of this problem solving. This is not me just solving the problem, but it's us together. And even though I'm the bottom line here as the parent, I'm the leader in the family, I want you to help think about, then we got a problem with you not turning off the lights in your bathroom when you leave in the morning. Electricity is expensive. We're paying for it. What do you think we can do to help remember? I know you're just forgetting because you're in a hurry. Need to do something to slow you down so you remember. What do you think? And so involve him. Put the consequence in the form of a choice. If the child says, well, I don't know, well, I've got some thoughts here. I mean, either you can turn off your lights on your own, or, I can do it for you. Oh, great, Dad, you do it for me. And then I add, and I could use the extra money. What extra money? Well, the money you're going to pay me for turning off the lights for you. I mean, if you're not doing your own job, and we've got to pay the electricity bill around here, you can contribute. So about every time I turn off the lights for you, you pay me $2 out of your allowance. So that's an either-or choice. Sometimes a win-then choice would work. 3, make sure the consequence is logically connected to the misbehavior. We've talked about that a little bit, but it's very easy just to say something that sounds connected, but it's not. Either, pick up after yourself, or there'll be no TV for a week. Well, if that's not connected, then it's not really a logical consequence, is it? Okay, number 4, give choices that you can live with. Not that your neighbor might be okay with or someone else, but you've got to be able to live with the consequence if that's a choice you gave your child. So again, one of the active parenting videos, we show mom giving the choice, either eat your peas or get down from the table and skip dessert, your choice. And the child says, well, I'll just get down from the table. And the mother slaps the table and says, sit down here, young lady, and finish those peas. It wasn't okay with mother for her to leave the table, so she shouldn't have made that a choice. If it's not okay with you, think of another choice. One mother in an active parenting class was going to have the consequence of not putting dishes in the dishwasher, that I'll just let them stack up in the sink. And the leader asked this mother, well, could you really live with that? And the mother just burst out laughing because she realized, in about a half a day, she'd be going crazy with a sink of messy dishes. So she had to pick a consequence that bothered the child more than it bothered her. And that's the key. You got to find a consequence that it's going to inconvenience or the child's not going to like. And again, not hurt them, not punish them, not humiliate them, but something that means something to them, but that you can live with. So, number 5, keep your tone of voice firm and calm. We've talked about that, but that's the voice you want in discipline. Firm says, I'm the leader here. I mean business. I'm in charge. Calm says, I'm not your enemy. I'm not here to have a fight with you. I'm here calmly to teach you how to live responsibly and have a better life. Give the choice one time, then enforce the consequence. That's the 6th step. If you keep giving the choice over again, a couple of things happen. One, your child ignores you, or they learn to ignore you until you actually enforce the consequence. And as you're giving it over and over again, you're getting more and more frustrated, and eventually you're getting angry. And that anger becomes the fuel that gets you to go ahead and follow through with the consequence to begin with. So don't wait till you're angry and get the energy to do it. Give the choice one time, then enforce the consequence. You give the child a chance to try again later, so it's not a consequence that lasts forever. You know, if Dennis, maybe you're not comfortable with the child washing the walls, maybe it's either, crayon on the paper, Dennis, or you lose the crayons. Okay, maybe it's you lose the crayons for the rest of the day the first time. Maybe the second day you lose them for 2 days, or maybe they go away for the week. But they always get a chance to try again later. But you need to enforce the consequence so they get a little bit of the feeling of there is a consequence to pay, for just ignoring the choices. And 7, expect testing from your child. In other words, it may get worse before it gets better. The idea of testing is your child's going to test to see if you're really going to follow through with the consequence. Kids are used to us doing things a certain way, and they're going to test to see if we'll continue to do it that way or backslide into doing it the old way. So if you're used to eventually yelling and screaming, there's some payoff in that. Maybe the child is into power, and they got the payoff of seeing you upset and angry. Maybe you've got a history of giving in after repeating yourself 2 or 3 times. You just go on to something else and forget about it, and they test to see if they can get away with it, because eventually you'll just forget about the rule or what it was that you wanted them to do. So you have to expect that it may get worse before it gets better, but if you stay consistent with the consequences, eventually your kids will learn that there's no payoff in it, and they may as well change their behavior. Unless, of course, you picked a consequence they don't care about. If you're sitting into their room for something and they've got an outlet of Toys R Us in there and they don't mind going to the room at all, then that's not going to be a consequence that does much teaching. So you might have to check your consequences and see if it's really something that matters and if you're following these other guidelines. So the last of the advanced discipline methods is one called FLAK. And my wife and I noticed with our kids, Megan and Ben, that we didn't have to use logical consequences all that much. I did have to use it for the lights turning off. But for the most part, they were pretty good at just, learning to change their behavior when we talked to them. And when I sat down to really think about what we were doing to get that change, I realized that we were using some skills that we teach in active parenting before we get to the consequences. Now, the C on the end of FLAK, and by the way, I use the acronym FLAK to mean to reduce the FLAK that often results from conflicts with our kids. The F is feelings. Usually when a child misbehaves, we go in there kind of angry and indignant. Why are you leaving this mess in the den? If you will slow that down and try to look at it from your child's perspective and get in touch with what they're feeling in the situation and let them know that you can identify with their feelings. Yeah, I know it's a hassle to have to get up and take your dishes back to the kitchen. I wish I could lie around and not have to worry about cleaning up too sometimes. Or the child doesn't want to go to school. Yeah, sometimes I don't feel like going to work either. I wish they'd come on the radio and say there's going to be a snow day today and, everybody stay at home. So that little bit of empathy, it says I'm on your side. I understand how you feel. There's a notion in brain research now called feeling felt. When people feel that they're felt by someone else really understands them, they start to calm down. It's a calming effect, really. So establishing that feeling level is the first step. Then L, we have to let them know, though, but there are limits to the situation. I have to get to work, and you have to get to school, and there's no snowstorm on the way. It'd be nice to be able to just leave our dirty dishes around the house, but we'd have a messy house, and we'd probably wind up with all kinds of, animals that we don't want in here. So to remind them of the limits. Again, you're not making them your enemy. You're not attacking them. It's just I recognize how you feel, but there are limits to the situation. But we don't stop there. We want to teach our kids to be problem solvers, and we want to help them meet their needs, their goals. So we look for alternatives. What can the child do? Okay, yeah, you can't leave your dirty dishes here. I'm not really willing to be your maid, unless of course you pay me, and I don't think you want to do that. So what's a good alternative for you, to clean up in here? Or how can you remember to turn off the lights? Or if I'm not letting you go to the midnight movie that you want to with a teenager, what's an alternative? What's a way to solve your problem within the limits? And a little bit of brainstorming with the child, again, looking for a solution that you all can live with. Will very often come up with something that may not be their first choice, but will be, it'll be satisfying. It'll also communicate to them that mom or dad's not the enemy. They're just here to enforce the limits and help us meet our goals within those limits. Sometimes, though, you still have to resort to see the consequences. If after looking at alternatives they're still misbehaving or still not remembering to do what it is that you talked about doing, then you need to think of a logical consequence that can help give it a little more teeth. So feelings, limits, alternatives, and consequences are a great way to sidestep power struggles and still teach your kids through the use of discipline what the needs of the situation are. And by the way, it's the situation. It's not just you being a dictator. It's looking for what's the need of the situation here. The need of the situation is to have dirty dishes cleaned up. It's to have electricity saved. It's to be safe. So, riding around at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning isn't as safe. So I'm going to have to say no to the midnight movie request. Okay, family involvement. Got another slide. We talk a good bit about family meetings because, again, the idea of participation and respect is a great way to involve your kids in solving problems and preventing problems. And you do that by sitting down either one-to-one or with the whole family. And different types of family meetings, they can be about a certain problem that's come up that you want to find a solution to as a family, or planning something together as a family. Some family meetings are just character talks. You just have a meeting around a certain character trait like courage or responsibility or honesty or something that you value as a family, and talk about the ins and outs. Again, encouraging each other and never being confrontational and no put downs or disrespectful kind of comments. But family meetings are a great way really to help the kids feel part of the family, but also be empowered to help decide on things that affect their lives. And when you do that, you get less rebellion later on. Family contracts. I don't really recommend a lot of family contracts, but they are useful for big things like, in tying back into, for instance, smoking prevention, getting an agreement with your child that they won't use cigarettes or other tobacco products. If you don't smoke, then it'd be great to have a family agreement that none of us in our family will use tobacco or smoke. If you do smoke and you aren't able to give it up yet, then you still can get a no-use agreement that your kids won't use tobacco, or no one in the, under the legal age of whatever the age is in your state will use tobacco. So again, family contracts can put a little bit of more emphasis on certain things, but don't get carried away and have a family contract about everything. Just maybe a few select big things that are really important to you. Okay, let's take a few more questions, and then we put up our last slide in a minute.
Okay. One question that came in said, could you give some examples of logical consequences if my daughter came home smelling like smoke after a party, and number 2, if I found cigarettes in her car?
Yeah. Oh, in either of those cases, she's either been around smokers or she's smoking herself, neither of which is a good situation, because what we know of secondhand smoke, we don't want her to smell of smoke because it's in her lungs as well as on her clothing. And again, you have a family meeting about that. You should have family meetings about smoking and drugs and other serious topics like that, and so your kids know where you stand on it. Yeah, there's even research that teens that know their parents would be upset if they smoked are about half as likely to smoke as kids that don't know where their parents stand on that. So, definitely have a family meeting about smoking and why you don't want your kids to smoke. And, when some of the future webinars will talk about how to do that more particularly how to have that kind of talk. But a consequence related to that would be something effective. You either lose the use of the car if you find cigarettes in the car, or if you're coming home from a party with smoke on your clothes, then you don't get to go to parties for a certain period of time. Maybe it's 2 weeks the first time, or something like that. But again, logically connect the behavior you're trying to change to the consequence. And again, doing that ahead of time, that's why that meeting about smoking, so they know it's not enough that you don't smoke, but you're not around those that do smoke. If someone's smoking, you got to excuse yourself. You just got to have to let them know, I can't be around you while you smoke. If I come home smelling of smoke, then, my parents and I have agreed that I'm not going to be able to, to go here again. So, plus, it's not good for me. I don't like the smoke in my lungs. Okay, what else you got?
Another question?
Mm-hmm,
okay,
sure.
This one says, I have a 13-year-old. He is pretty responsible. However, he is a procrastinator. What is the effective way to deal with this problem?
When then is good for procrastination. When you've done such and such, then you may do the next thing. So it sequences it. So you've got to finish this before you can do what you really want to do. So there's no point in procrastinating it because you're not going to get to either go out and play or play your video game or do whatever else that comes next. Oh, and by the way, when you use a win-then choice, be careful not to turn it into a bribe or reward. You're not coming up with something new. It's not a if you do this, then I'll give you this or take you here. It's when-then. It takes two things that normally happen, but it sequences them so that when we've done A, and it's often a question of time. If we have time, we can do B. So let's get A done in a hurry. If it's grocery shopping, when we finish our grocery shopping, if we have time, we'll stop by the park, and you can swing for a little while. When we've done A, then B kicks in. So that would be a good use of cutting off procrastination.
Okay, shall we move on to the next question?
Sure.
Okay, we might be able to get a couple in. This one says, I work for an agency that teaches active parenting, and presently we have one parent who says that no form of discipline works for her 10 or her 13-year-old except punishment. Do you have any suggestions?
Well, I have to know what specifically she means by punishment, what logical consequences that she's tried before. If a punishment works, then a logical consequence will work because they're pretty similar except that you're finding a logical consequence that's connected to the misbehavior. If she's just relying on punishment, then I really have to know the specifics to know why not. And then you also, there are some cases where the logical consequences with a child that's into power, parents can easily turn a logical consequence into a punishment and get into an argument or get into a real confrontation. And the thing about punishment, too, is it's working, but it works in the short run, but she's got to continually come up with punishments again and again. That's the problem with it. It doesn't teach the responsibility, so it doesn't really solve the problem in the long run. So again, without a specific example, it's kind of hard to pinpoint what an alternative would be.
Okay, let's try one more. This one says, do you have any suggestions for a parent who feels that embarrassment is the appropriate discipline?
Feels embarrassment?
Like embarrassing the child?
Oh, that's not usually, it's almost never a good idea. That when you embarrass a child, you're going to, again, it damages the relationship. You're not going to feel good about the person embarrassing you. And, we want kids to build a good sense of self-esteem, and that runs counter to that. If they're feeling ashamed of themselves and embarrassed, and particularly in front of their friends, then that's just going to be counterproductive all the way around. They're going to feel lower self-esteem. They're going to become more discouraged. And when kids become discouraged, they tend to misbehave even more. So, take your child aside if it's a situation where you got to tell them something and, there are a group of their friends around. Don't just embarrass them in front of their friends. You say, Megan, could you come over here for a second? I need to talk to you about something. And just excuse yourself and come out of the room for a minute and talk to her. Then let her go back in. But don't use embarrassment as a teaching tool or as a form of discipline. It's harsh punishment, and it's not a good idea in the long run at all. want to do is encourage kids. I want to build them up and help them feel good about themselves. And I guess I left that out, but whenever we discipline kids, we always want to look for an opportunity to catch them improving and making an effort to do better. So, if I've had a talk with Ben about turning off the lights in his bathroom and he turns them off the next day and I ignore it, then that sends the message that, I only notice you when you're misbehaving. I'm not really there when you're doing well. We've got to retrain ourselves to catch him doing good and then to let him know, hey, I really appreciate that you turned off your lights after that conversation we had. Keep it up, please, or thank you. So look for the opportunity to encourage, which means to build courage. And I think that's the topic of one of our upcoming webinars, is how to build courage and self-esteem. And let me say this about discipline, too. It doesn't occur in a vacuum. Discipline always occurs within the context of your overall relationship with your kids. If that relationship is a good one, if you've built through encouragement and taking time for positive interaction with your kids and being there for them and supporting them and responding to their feelings and helping them learn to solve problems and doing all that positive stuff, the bedtime stories, the laughing together, all that kind of stuff, you've built up a relationship that can withstand some discipline. It's like a bank account. When you build up a relationship, you're putting money in the bank. When you're disciplining, you're making a withdrawal. So if you haven't focused on the positive side of the relationship and it's time to discipline, you got no money to withdraw, and you're going to wind up with some bounced checks, which is not an easy way to parent. And that's why, by the way, when you have a remarriage and a step-parent comes into the situation, you can't come in as a disciplinarian. You got to come in first and to build up that relationship and establish some trust with your stepkids before you can take over the discipline. Or you have to really tread gently there for a while. So all parenting is really interrelated. You can't just do one thing without the other. If you just build up a relationship where you don't set limits, that's not going to work. But if you just set limits and you don't build up a relationship, you run out of effectiveness also. So
I wish we had more time today. We had a lot of questions. We're learning as we go, and maybe next time we'll make our presentation a little bit shorter and save room for more questions. We appreciate everybody attending today. And I know our attendees today can email you on your blog, Dr. Popkin, which the blog is on www.realparentsrealanswers.com if they have more questions. And there's also a link that people can sign up on at your blog that will send them an email when you have a new blog entry.
Okay,
if any of our attendees would like a copy of this presentation, you can also request that through the link on Dr. Popkin's blog, and we'd be happy to send it to you. And we're also going to work on putting this webinar up on the website at www.realparentsrealanswers.com. Thank you, Dr. Popkin, for giving us some insight today on discipline and helping us keep our kids from smoking.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
This concludes our presentation. Thank you all for attending.